The tennis men's world number one, Novak Djokovic, has arrived in Melbourne. He's looking to defend his Australian Open title, but he's been welcomed with a backlash over a waiver he's been given by tournament organisers, allowing him to compete despite the fact he's not fully vaccinated for COVID-19. And he is yet to clear through passport control hours after landing. We're going to spend the next few minutes looking at how the story has developed. Novak Djokovic is the reigning champion at the Australian Open. On Tuesday, he tweeted this picture from the airport tarmac and told us, "I'm heading down under with an exemption permission." But before he arrived, Australia's Prime Minister had a warning.
We await his presentation and what evidence he provides to support that. If that evidence is insufficient, then he won't be treated any different to anyone else and he'll be on the next plane home.
And soon enough, things began to look more complicated. Paul Suckle of The Age reported Djokovic landed about 30 minutes ago. Federal officials realised hours before his visa application was erroneous. Border Force has discretion to allow entry, but his pathway in is uncertain. There are many unknowns in this story, and it revolves around that special dispensation that Djokovic has been given. Tennis Australia explained the decision.
Anyone coming into Australia or coming onto the grounds on the Melbourne Park precinct would have to be vaccinated or would have to have a medical exemption.
And the BBC's tennis correspondent Russell Fuller explains how this works.
These medical exemptions are not given away lightly. First of all, it has to be approved by the Australian Technical Advisory Group on Immunisation, and then a second panel made up of medical experts has to also give the green light.
That's the process, and here's the criteria. A person can get an exemption if they suffer from an inflamed cardiac illness or an acute major medical condition, if a serious mental health condition means the vaccine process could put them at risk, or if they have a serious adverse reaction to a first vaccine dose. There's a fourth possibility too. Here's Russell Fuller again.
One possibility that I think is a real one is that he has recently tested positive for COVID. If he had tested positive at any point, in fact, in the last 6 months, that enables you to defer your vaccination and to enter Australia without having the vaccination proof.
That's the process, but we also don't know which of these apply to Djokovic, and there's scepticism from some players.
I think if it was me that wasn't vaccinated, I wouldn't be getting an exemption.
There's scepticism in the press too. The Herald Sun in Melbourne went for this headline: "No vax, no worries." Inside, former Australian tennis star Sam Groth says the exemption spits in the face of all Australians, and he's not the only one who's upset.
You shouldn't be allowed to come. It's his choice not to be vaccinated, which is fine, and I think the government here has made the choice that, you should be vaccinated.
Remember the context here. Melbourne's experienced more days of lockdown than any other major city in the world. But faced with all of this criticism, Tennis Australia insists the process was fair.
And that panel was designed, made of independent doctors, epidemiologists, was designed to assess any application that was received. They were blind applicants that were received. In other words, no one knew who the applicant was.
There's no reason to suggest the process was manipulated for Djokovic's benefit, but it's getting attention, as you'll hear from these Australian players.
Yeah, apparently it's an independent panel. He must have fit the criteria somehow.
Look, I just think it's just very interesting. That's all I'm going to say.
It is interesting, not least because everyone knows what Djokovic thinks about vaccines. We could start with this Facebook Live in April 2020. He said he was personally opposed to vaccination. In June 2020, when most sport was cancelled, Djokovic hosted a tennis event in Serbia and Croatia with fans attending. Instead of social distancing, there were some parties, a basketball game and, of course, tennis. Djokovic, his wife and several players all got COVID. And then in August of 2020, he told the New York Times his issue is with someone forcing me to put something in my body that I don't want. For me, that's unacceptable. His language has been clear. Fast forward to December just gone, and Djokovic was named in Serbia's team for the ATP Cup in Sydney, but pulled out at the last minute. He was waiting for a decision about competing in Australia, his coach told us. Now that decision has come. We're told 26 unvaccinated players and staff in total applied for exemptions, and Djokovic was one of a handful that were granted. And the Victoria State Government has tried to be clear on this.
The process is the process. Nobody has had special treatment. The process is incredibly robust. It's de-identified, and we are where we are.
Well, that was where we were, but then we had this from the national government. In a statement it said, it's the Commonwealth Government that will enforce our requirements at the Australian border. Victoria State Sports Minister added, we've always been clear on 2 points. Visa approvals are a matter for the federal government and medical exemptions are a matter for doctors. But while Djokovic was in the air, travelling from Dubai all the way to Melbourne, not much was clear. It wasn't clear why he'd got an exemption. It wasn't clear, now he was on the ground, if he'd been let in.